The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of pine trees surrounding Trevor Gaines's cabin on the edge of Lake Keowee in South Carolina, casting dappled patterns across the wooden porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and the distant murmur of water lapping against the shoreline. Trevor sat at his sturdy oak table inside the cabin, his broad shoulders hunched slightly over a sprawl of documents. County maps lay unfurled before him, their edges curling from repeated handling, with sections of shoreline highlighted in bright yellow marker. Property rights notations dotted the margins, scribbled in his neat, deliberate handwriting. Beside the maps, a legal pad brimmed with notes, bullet points on local ordinances, questions about enforcement, and reminders to cross-reference state laws. Across from him, State Attorney General Roland Pike adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his expression one of focused intensity. Roland was a man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair cropped short and a suit that spoke of authority without ostentation. He had driven out to the cabin at Trevor's invitation, drawn by a series of complaints that had crossed his desk about overreaching homeowners associations in rural communities like this one. "Trevor," Roland said, his voice steady and measured, like a judge weighing evidence, "these maps confirm what you've been saying. The county code allows for dock extensions up to 15 feet beyond the original permit, provided environmental impact assessments are filed. You've done that twice, from what I see." Trevor nodded, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. He was a man built for hard work, his frame solid from years in logistics, hauling freight across state lines. Buying this cabin had been his reward, a cash purchase after decades of saving, a sanctuary for fishing weekends with his brothers and bonfires with his nieces and nephews. The place wasn't ostentatious, pine walls that creaked with the wind, a stone fireplace that crackled warmly in the evenings, and large windows overlooking the lake. But from the day he moved in, peace had been elusive. Judith Carroway, the HOA president, had made sure of that. Her visits started innocently enough, comments on mailbox placement, critiques of porch chair colors, but they escalated into formal notices, each one chipping away at his sense of ownership. "I appreciate you coming out here, Roland," Trevor replied, his tone calm but laced with underlying frustration. "Judith's been relentless. It's like she owns the whole lake, not just her plot. I've followed every rule, but she twists them to fit her agenda." Roland leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. HOAs serve a purpose, maintaining community standards, but when they become tools for personal vendettas, that's where my office gets involved. We've seen patterns like this across the state: selective enforcement, intimidation tactics. Your case fits right in. The two men delved deeper into the documents, Roland pointing out precedents from similar disputes. The cabin's interior was a blend of rustic charm and practical functionality. Fishing rods leaned against one wall, a bookshelf crammed with logistics manuals and legal thrillers, and a kitchenette where coffee percolated softly. Outside, the lake stretched serene and inviting, a loon calling intermittently, its cry echoing like a reminder of the tranquility Trevor sought. Then came the pounding on the door, sharp, insistent, rattling the frame as if demanding submission. Trevor looked up, startled, his pen pausing mid-note. Roland raised an eyebrow, his dry smile returning. "You expecting company, Trevor?" Trevor shook his head, setting down his pen. "Not a soul. Everyone knows this place is quiet. Or at least it's supposed to be." The knock echoed again, louder, followed by a voice that cut through the wood like a blade. "Open up. Homeowners Association business. Trevor's jaw tightened. He recognized that voice instantly. Judith Carroway, the self-appointed guardian of Lake Keowe's standards. A woman in her early 60s with sharp features and a perpetual air of superiority. Judith carried her HOA presidency like a crown. Elected as a volunteer, she wielded it with the authority of a monarch, turning minor infractions into major battles. Trevor rose slowly, his movements deliberate, as if steeling himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. He approached the door, glancing back at Roland, who nodded subtly, his expression unchanging. Trevor opened it cautiously, keeping one hand on the frame, the other resting casually against the wood, steady as stone. There she stood, Judith Carroway, clutching a thick binder under one arm, her lips pressed into a thin, painful line. Her graying hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her outfit, a crisp blouse and slacks, screamed officiousness. Beside her, two uniformed officers from the Oconee County Sheriff's Department loomed, their hands resting on their belts, faces unreadable under the brims of their hats. The sight of them sent a chill through Trevor, but he didn't flinch. "Mr. Gaines," Judith began, her tone clipped and condescending, as if addressing a subordinate, "we need to discuss your ongoing violations." Trevor didn't move aside. "Violations? This is my property. I know my rights." From behind him, Roland's voice carried sharp and unmistakable, "And so do I." Judith blinked, craning her neck to peer inside. Her eyes widened as they landed on Roland Pike. No ordinary guest. His name graced headlines. His face appeared on evening news broadcasts. As South Carolina's Attorney General, his presence shifted the gravity of the room, making every word heavier. For the first time, Judith's unshakable authority faltered. "Attorney General Pike," she stammered, her voice losing its edge. I didn't realize you were here." Roland leaned back in his chair, unhurried, clearly, "And I'm curious, Ms. Carroway, on what grounds you've entered this man's property with law enforcement in tow. I'd like to hear it directly." The officers exchanged a glance, silent. They hadn't anticipated this twist, their routine response to an HOA complaint suddenly complicated by the state's top legal official. Judith recovered quickly, flipping open her binder with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Gaines has made unapproved modifications to the shoreline, extended his dock beyond the permitted limit, added lighting that doesn't conform with our guidelines." Trevor cut her off, his tone firm but measured. "Every change I made is within county code. I checked it myself, and as you can see, I've been meeting with the Attorney General to review these very issues." He gestured to the paperwork spread across the table. The cabin's air grew thick, tension coiling like a spring. Outside, the loon's call pierced the silence, a stark contrast to the brewing storm inside. Roland stood, adjusting his suit jacket, and walked slowly toward the doorway, his gaze fixed on Judith. "I've seen enough of these neighborhood disputes," he said evenly, "but when an HOA president uses her position to drag police officers into private property without cause, that raises questions, big ones." Judith swallowed hard, her binder seeming heavier in her arms. The officers shifted, suddenly aware they stood in contested territory, far beyond a simple enforcement call. Trevor didn't gloat. He simply stepped back, allowing Roland to stand shoulder to shoulder with him in the doorway. "You came here thinking you could intimidate me," Trevor said steadily. "Instead, you walked into something you weren't ready for." The words hung in the air, Judith's face flushing crimson as her authority unraveled in real time. But this was just the beginning. The confrontation at the doorway would soon ripple outward, exposing not just Judith's motives, but the fragile power dynamics in the neighborhood. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. Judith stood stiff as a post, her binder pressed to her chest like a shield. The deputies kept their hands near their belts, but made no move, their unreadable expressions now tinged with uncertainty. Inside, Trevor and Roland waited, calm but unyielding, ready for whatever excuse Judith might muster. It was Trevor who broke the stillness. "You've brought officers onto my property, Judith. Why don't you explain to them, and to me, exactly what I've supposedly done wrong?" Judith cleared her throat, her voice regaining some of its sharpness. "Mr. Gaines, as president of the Lake Keowee Homeowners Association, it's my duty to enforce the community's bylaws. You've repeatedly ignored notices regarding your dock, and your lighting system is disruptive to the neighborhood." Roland leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. "Notices, Ms. Carroway, or accusations, there's a difference." Judith shifted her stance, rattled but defiant. "The bylaws are very clear. Any extension of a dock requires approval from the HOA board. He didn't submit the proper forms." Trevor's lips curved into a dry half-smile. "I submitted everything, twice, got nothing back but silence. That's why I asked the Attorney General here today, to review whether the HOA enforcement has been fair." The deputies glanced at each other again, neither expecting to find themselves in a standoff involving the state's top lawman. Roland pushed off the frame and stepped closer to Judith, his eyes unwavering. "Ms. Carroway, I want you to listen carefully. Property rights in South Carolina are not dictated by personal preference or selective interpretation of rules. If this homeowner followed county codes and submitted the required forms, then your personal dislike of his improvements doesn't give you authority to escalate with police involvement." Judith's cheeks reddened, her voice taking on a brittle edge. "This isn't about dislike. This is about maintaining standards. We all work hard to preserve the community's value." Trevor's tone hardened, though he kept his volume controlled. "Standards for some, not for all. I've seen the way you ignore other neighbors' projects. I put in a few extra feet of dock, and suddenly you're at my door with a binder and backup." For a moment, nobody spoke. Outside, the lake glimmered under the sun, calm and endless, but the tension in the doorway felt anything but calm. Roland gestured toward the table inside. "Why don't we bring this conversation in here? You've barged into a man's cabin. You might as well hear what we were actually discussing." The deputies hesitated, but when Trevor stepped back to open the door wider, neither objected. Judith followed, her heels clicking against the wooden floor, as though each step announced her refusal to lose face. Inside, the cabin felt warmer, more intimate. Pine walls absorbing the light, the stone fireplace standing sentinel. Roland returned to his seat and tapped one of the documents. "This is what we were reviewing. Shoreline access disputes across this county. Multiple homeowners have been blocked or harassed when they attempted to use their property in ways that are fully legal. Mr. Gaines is not the only one raising concerns. His situation fits a much larger pattern." Judith's mouth opened, but Roland raised a hand. "You walked in here thinking this was about one dock. It's not. It's about whether your authority is being applied equally or whether it's being weaponized against certain homeowners while others get a free pass." Trevor leaned forward, looking directly at Judith. "Like the Johnsons down the road. Their dock has been extended for years, and they've got string lights hanging all the way across it. Did you send deputies to their door? Judith's lips pressed together. She didn't answer. Roland's voice cut in again. That silence says more than your binder ever will. The deputies shifted uneasily. One finally spoke, his voice cautious. Ma'am, maybe we should step back from this. If the Attorney General is investigating these disputes, we don't want to interfere where we don't have authority. Judith spun toward him, flustered. I called you because I thought this was a simple matter of enforcement. Doesn't look simple to me. The deputy replied. Judith stood frozen, her binder trembling slightly in her hands. Her power had always come from intimidation, from being the loudest voice. But now it carried no weight. Trevor watched her, calm but unyielding. You wanted to put me on the defensive, Judith. Instead, you've just put yourself there. The Attorney General's words sealed the moment. This isn't over, and I'll make sure of that. The cabin fell silent again, except for the faint creak of wood as Judith turned and walked out, her steps sharp, almost frantic. The officers followed, leaving Trevor and Roland standing in the glow of the light. For Trevor, the confrontation felt like a turning point. He wasn't just defending himself. He was part of something larger that could change how power was used in their community. But outside, word was already spreading, turning one confrontation into a storm that touched every corner of the neighborhood. The door shut with a dull thud, the sound echoing through the cabin like the final note of a tense symphony. Trevor leaned back against the table, exhaling slowly, while Roland studied the papers as if to ground the moment. Trevor broke the quiet. I should have known she'd try something like this. Judith's been looking for a way to corner me since the day I moved in. Roland didn't look up, his voice even. She's not unique, Trevor. People like her wrap themselves in rules because it makes them feel untouchable. But rules twisted out of shape are nothing more than weapons. Trevor gave a short laugh, humorless. Weapons aimed at the wrong people. He crossed the room and poured himself a glass of water, his hands steady, though his eyes burned with the heat of the confrontation. The funny thing is, she probably thought she was doing the community a favor, keeping everything in line, but whose line? Her own. Roland finally looked up, his gaze sharp. That's the question, and it's the one I'll be asking loudly. Before Trevor could answer, there was a sound outside. Not another knock, but muffled voices, curious and cautious. Trevor moved to the window and pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek. Two neighbors stood by the road. Mr. Jennings, who lived 3 doors down, hands on his hips, shaking his head. The other, a woman Trevor barely knew, leaned close, whispering. Both kept looking toward the cabin. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Trevor muttered. Roland joined him. It never does. Neighborhoods thrive on stories, and this one, an HOA president storming a cabin with cops, only to run into the state attorney general. That's the kind of story that grows bigger by the minute. Trevor let the curtain fall. So, what now? You said this isn't over. What happens next? Roland's expression was unreadable, but his tone carried certainty. Next, we test whether people like Judith can keep hiding behind titles. Because she won't retreat quietly, she'll double down, try to spin the story, claim she was protecting the community. Trevor folded his arms. She's got allies, a lot of them, people who like things just the way they are. Roland nodded slowly, and that's where it gets messy. This isn't just about you, Trevor. This is about everyone who's been quietly stepped on, but never had a voice strong enough to push back. Their conversation was interrupted by tires crunching on gravel. A pickup pulled into the drive and out stepped a broad-shouldered man with silver hair tucked under a ball cap. Trevor's face softened. "That's Frank Dillman. He's been here 30 years. Retired firefighter." Frank walked up to the porch with deliberate steps. When Trevor opened the door, Frank's eyes swept past him, landing on Roland. "I heard what just went down," Frank said, his voice gravelly but calm. Words traveling fast. "Judith stomping around, saying you disrespected her authority. But plenty of folks are tired of her power trips. Thought you should know. You've got support." Trevor motioned for him to come in. "Frank, this is Attorney General Pike." Roland extended his hand. "Good to meet you, Mr. Dillman." Frank shook it firmly. "Wish it was under better circumstances. I've watched Judith pull this stunt with others. Vines for lawn chairs, letters for paint colors. Folks don't fight back because they don't want the trouble, but barging into your place with the police, that's a step too far." Trevor caught the emphasis. "So you've seen the pattern too?" Frank nodded. "I've lived long enough to spot when someone's hiding behind a rule book just to swing weight around. She'll play victim now, say she was only doing her job. But truth is, she's been running that HOA like it's her kingdom." Roland leaned forward, his lawyer's mind piecing together details. "Your perspective matters, Mr. Dillman. People willing to speak on the record will make all the difference." Frank scratched his chin. "I'll do it. Been quiet too long." The three men stood in the cabin, an unlikely alliance forged by one confrontation. Trevor felt the shift in the air. What had begun as an ambush was transforming into something larger, something that could shake Judith's grip on the neighborhood. But even with that support, Trevor knew this was far from over. Judith wasn't the type to accept humiliation. She would regroup, gather her allies, and return harder than before. Trevor glanced at Roland. "She's not going to stop here. You know that." Roland's reply was steady. "No, but neither will we." Frank pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "HOA meetings scheduled for later today. I guarantee she'll try to turn this into her stage. You'd better be ready." Trevor took the paper, his jaw firming. Then that's where the fight moves next. The three men exchanged a look of quiet agreement. Outside, the voices of neighbors still carried faintly on the breeze. The story was no longer contained. It was leaking through every fence, every backyard conversation, every email chain in the community. Inside the cabin, Trevor felt both the weight of the coming battle and the spark of resolve. He wasn't just standing for himself anymore. He was standing for every homeowner who had been silenced by intimidation. And with Roland Pike by his side, this fight was no longer on Judith's terms. As the sun climbed higher, the neighborhood buzzed with the news. At the gas station near the main road, the clerk overheard customers talking in hushed tones. She barged in with deputies, one man said, shaking his head, and the Attorney General was sitting right there. Can you imagine the look on her face? Must have been priceless. Half a mile away, in a diner's parking lot, a retired couple leaned over their plates. "I heard Judith claimed it was all about rules," the woman said, "but Frank Dillman told me Trevor filed all the paperwork. She ignored it. Selective enforcement, plain and simple." In a community where small stories usually revolved around shutter colors or trash cans, this one hit differently. It was no longer petty. It pulled in the state's top legal officer, and people couldn't resist weighing in. Trevor noticed the changes as he stepped outside briefly. Neighbors who usually looked the other way now nodded encouragingly. A few stopped by his driveway, heard what happened, Good on you for standing your ground. But support wasn't universal. On the neighborhood Facebook group, posts piled up, some sympathetic, others defensive of Judith. The HOA protects property values. Without Judith, this place would fall apart. Don't let outsiders tear us down. Another fired back. Protect property values or protect control. There's a difference. Trevor scrolled through the posts, shaking his head. She's already spinning it. Roland glanced at the screen. Of course she is. That's how people like her survive. Turn the story before anyone else can. Trevor set the phone down. The worst part is, some folks will buy it. They'll say I'm stirring trouble, that I should have just let it go. Roland leaned back. Let it go. She stormed your cabin with armed deputies. If anything, you showed restraint. That matters. Just then, the doorbell rang. Trevor opened it to find a younger neighbor, Callie Brenner, shifting nervously on the porch, holding a folder. Trevor, I'm sorry to bother you. I wanted to drop this off before the meeting. He frowned. What is it? She stepped inside and handed him the folder. Inside were copies of notices, fines, and warnings Judith had sent her over the years, from fence height complaints to accusations about her children's basketball hoop. Callie's voice cracked. I didn't fight back. I just paid the fines because I didn't want trouble. But after what she did to you, I can't stay quiet anymore. People should know this isn't new. She's been doing it for years. Roland flipped through the documents, nodding. This is exactly what we need. Proof that Trevor's not the only one. If enough neighbors are willing to speak up, Judith's credibility will collapse. Trevor looked at Callie, grateful. Thank you. I know it isn't easy. She smiled nervously. It's easier now, knowing you're not afraid to stand up to her. A lot of us were waiting for someone to do it first. After she left, Trevor closed the folder and set it beside Frank's notes. A small pile of evidence was forming, and with Roland's guidance, it looked like a case that could no longer be brushed aside. But whispers weren't harmless. They carried weight, spreading faster than facts. And Judith was working hard to push her version. The lake shimmered under the light, calm as if unaware of the storm. For Trevor, the coming hours would decide more than his dock or lights. It would decide if truth could rise above rumor. As the day progressed, the narrative shifted. What started as whispers turned into testimony. Neighbors came forward, each with their story of Judith's wielded power. Frank gathered a small group at his back porch, inviting Trevor and Roland. The air smelled of pine smoke, but the conversation was casual no more. Frank leaned forward. I've been waiting for someone to put her in check. Truth is, I've got a box full of notices from her. Once she fined me $200 because the grass at the edge of my driveway was an inch too tall after rain. Said it ruined uniformity. Evelyn Parks shook her head, clutching yellowed papers. She came after me for having a porch swing. Said it didn't match the aesthetic. My husband built that swing before he passed. I wasn't about to take it down, but she threatened court. I ended up moving it to the backyard just to stop the letters. Her voice cracked, and Trevor felt a knot in his chest. It wasn't just him. It was dozens, silenced by Judith's authority and the threat of legal battles. Roland took notes. Every incident paints a pattern. Alone, they look petty. Together, they show abuse of authority. Frank's wife, Marlene, chimed in. She knows most people don't have the time or money to fight back, so they give in. And the board, they're too scared of her to speak up. Trevor leaned back, letting the voices wash over him. It was overwhelming, each story adding weight but also strength. This wasn't his fight alone. It was a collective reckoning. Word spread quickly that residents were sharing stories. Some handed Trevor envelopes with photocopied letters. Others slipped him screenshots of emails where Judith's tone was about intimidation, not fairness. A younger couple, Marcus and Tessa Van, stopped by with a USB drive. These are recordings from board meetings. Judith didn't know my phone was picking them up. You'll hear her talking about targeting people she thinks don't fit the neighborhood image. Trevor's hands clenched as he played the file. Judith's voice was unmistakable. We can't just let anyone do what they want. If we give an inch, we'll lose control of this place. People like Gaines need to be taught that rules are rules. The room went silent. Roland's jaw tightened. That's evidence that can't be ignored. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was targeting residents. Trevor stared at the screen. So it wasn't just me. She made me the example because she thought no one would push back. Roland looked squarely at him. She miscalculated. Meanwhile, Judith sensed the ground shifting. She had built her reputation on fear, but now her authority bled away. In response, she dug in harder, holding private gatherings with supporters, telling them Trevor was stirring chaos, painting Roland as an outsider. At one gathering, overheard by a resident who repeated it to Trevor, Judith snapped, "If they think they can strip me of my authority, they've got another thing coming. This community needs order, and I'm the only one willing to keep it." But her words sounded desperate. The next HOA bulletin, normally filled with reminders, read like a manifesto. We must remain vigilant against individuals who threaten the integrity of our neighborhood. Trevor read it aloud, shaking his head. She's cornered but thinks she can win. Roland's response was steady. Her words are evidence of intent. She's framing herself as protector while ignoring residents' voices. The community was at a tipping point. Some clung to Judith, fearful of change. More realized the cost of her control. The silenced voices, petty fines, threats in polite language. Trevor felt the weight of those stories every time a neighbor handed him proof. The fight had grown bigger than a dock or lights. As Roland made his move, stepping from private meetings into the public eye, calling for accountability, the day hurtled toward its climax. Roland decided to step out from closed doors. The shift was felt immediately. Until then, he was a background figure, but now he walked up courthouse steps with neighbors, cameras clicking. His voice carried through microphones. "We are here because what happened at Mr. Gaines's cabin is not isolated. It's a pattern of intimidation and unequal enforcement by an HOA president who has forgotten her role. Homeowners deserve protection, not persecution, and law enforcement must not be misused for personal vendettas." Behind him, Trevor stood, Frank and Callie flanking with notices. The faces of ordinary residents were front and center. The press conference lasted minutes, but landed like a hammer. Headlines blared. Attorney General calls out HOA over abuse of authority. That same day, Roland appeared on a local news station under bright lights. When rules become tools for discrimination or selective targeting, they are no longer rules. They are weapons. And when citizens are threatened in their homes, it is my responsibility to intervene. Judith, watching, slammed her remote. She felt walls closing. Her allies were loyal but shaken by the sight of the Attorney General with neighbors they'd dismissed. The next morning, the day continued. The forum at the county library drew a crowd. Over 50 packed the room. One by one, residents spoke. Evelyn on her porch swing, Callie on her basketball hoop, Frank on fines. When Trevor's turn came, he spoke plainly. "I didn't move here to fight. I bought a cabin to fish, to spend time with family, to find peace. But peace doesn't mean silence when you're treated unfairly. If it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone." The crowd applauded steadily. Reporters scribbled. By midday, the forum was news, Trevor's image plastered everywhere. Judith, furious, called a private meeting. "He's turning this into a circus. We cannot let him dictate the narrative. We must remind people that without order, this neighborhood will fall apart. But her allies shifted uncomfortably. They had seen the crowd, heard the applause. Momentum was slipping. Back at the cabin, Trevor sat with Roland by the fire, papers spread. Feels like we're breaking through. Roland nodded. We are, but breaking through isn't enough. We have to make sure it sticks. While Roland built the case, Judith plotted behind doors, preparing for a desperate attempt to keep power. As the HOA meeting approached that evening, the community center filled. Cars lined the road, tension thick. Trevor sat in the second row, Roland at his side. The buzz quieted as Judith entered, binder in hand, chin high, but eyes darting. She rapped the gavel. This meeting is in session. Recent events have brought unwanted attention. I stand by my actions, everything to protect property values, safety, quality of life. A few clapped weakly. Trevor stood. With respect, Judith, what you've done is the opposite. You've used your title to intimidate, ignored paperwork, singled out families, threatened with fines until they gave up. That's not leadership, that's control. Judith's eyes narrowed. And who are you to speak? You're new here, you don't understand the work. Evelyn rose. I've lived here 20 years. You made me move the porch swing my husband built. That wasn't rules, that was power. Murmurs ran through. Frank stood. You find me over grass and paint. Ignored the Johnson's dock, but came after Trevor like a criminal. That's not fairness. Judith slammed her gavel. This is out of order. Roland rose, room stilling. Order is what we need. True order built on fairness, equality, respect. Not fear, not favoritism. Judith reddened. This is an HOA meeting, not a courtroom. You have no jurisdiction. Roland didn't flinch. The law applies everywhere. When an HOA crosses into harassment, that's my business. The law won't look kindly on what's happened. Gasps echoed. Board members shifted. Sandra Kim spoke. Judith, maybe it's time to step aside. We can't pretend everything is fine when half the neighborhood feels attacked. Judith snapped. Step aside. I've held this community together. Without me, values would sink, standards crumble. Trevor's voice cut. Standards don't crumble when treated fairly. They crumble when trust is broken. That's what you've done. The room erupted. Applause, mutters, the divide sharp, but momentum shifting. Roland raised his hand, quieting. This isn't about docks or lights. It's about power used to protect or punish. Today, you decide the path. Sandra motioned. It's time for a vote of no confidence in your leadership. Chaos cheers, protests. Judith banged furiously. You have no authority, but her words were thin against the tide. The vote didn't happen officially. Judith insisted on procedure, but the moment had slipped. Residents saw her rattled, their voices amplified. Over the next hours, the neighborhood changed. Residents talked openly, fear lifted. Trevor felt it at his cabin. Neighbors stopped by with encouragement. Roland filed a formal inquiry, calling for an audit. The announcement made headlines. Even Judith's allies distanced. That evening, Judith arrived at the cabin, pale, determined. I've decided to step down, effective immediately. My efforts have been misunderstood. I no longer wish to cause division. She set the binder down, turned left. Trevor and Roland stood silent as taillights disappeared. Frank stopped by, grinning. She waved the white flag. We'll elect someone who listens. Trevor smiled. That's the hope. The neighborhood rewrote bylaws with residents present, ensuring fairness. Callie joined the board, her kids free to play. Evelyn rehung her swing. As evening fell, Trevor found quiet. Fishing, family, fire pit. But deeper meaning, he earned peace, helped others claim it. At a cookout on Frank's lawn, Roland nodded. Not every fight ends in bitterness, sometimes in change. Trevor looked around, laughter, clinking cans, kids running. Sometimes change is the victory. As the sun reached its zenith over Lake Keowee, casting a golden sheen on the water's surface, the events at Trevor Gaines's cabin began to cascade through the neighborhood like waves from a thrown stone. The cabin, with its pine walls and stone fireplace, stood as a silent witness to the morning's drama. But the story it held was anything but silent. Word spread with the speed of a summer breeze, carrying whispers from porch to porch, phone to phone, transforming a private confrontation into a public reckoning. Trevor stood on his porch, the wooden planks creaking under his weight, gazing out at the lake. The loon's call echoed again, a melancholy note in the otherwise peaceful scene. His mind raced, replaying the moments: Judith's pounding knock, her flushed face, the deputy's uneasy shifts. Roland Pike, still inside reviewing documents, had become an unexpected ally, his presence turning what could have been a humiliating ambush into a stand of defiance. But Trevor knew the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun to unfold across the community. Inside, Roland sorted through the growing pile of evidence: Callie's folder, Frank's notes, the USB drive from Marcus and Tessa. "We're building something solid here, Trevor," he said, his voice steady as he organized the papers on the oak table. The cabin's interior, with its fishing rods and bookshelves, felt like a command center now, the maps and legal pads taking on new significance. These stories aren't isolated. They're threads in a tapestry of abuse. We need more voices to weave it complete. Trevor nodded, pouring fresh coffee. "I never thought it'd come to this. I just wanted to fish, have family over, but if standing up means helping others, then I'm in." The doorbell rang again, pulling Trevor back to the present. This time it was Evelyn Parks, the elderly widow with her stack of yellowed papers. She stepped inside tentatively, her eyes darting around the warm space. "I heard about what happened this morning, Trevor. Frank told me. I brought these letters from Judith about my porch swing. She made me feel like a criminal for keeping something my husband built." Roland took the papers gently, scanning them. "Mrs. Parks, this is invaluable. It shows a pattern. Personal items targeted under vague aesthetic rules. Would you be willing to speak publicly?" Evelyn hesitated, her hands twisting the hem of her cardigan. "I was afraid before, but seeing you stand up to her, yes, for my husband, yes." As Evelyn left, more neighbors arrived. The cabin's porch became a gathering spot, the air filled with the scent of lake water and pine. Marlene Dillman brought a plate of sandwiches, her face set in determination. "Frank's out talking to more folks. People are opening up." That confrontation lit a fire. Trevor listened as stories poured in. A man named Mr. Jennings described fines for his garden gnomes, deemed tacky by Judith. A young family spoke of warnings about their dogs barking, while others' pets roamed free. Each tale added layers to the narrative, painting Judith not as a guardian of standards, but as a selective enforcer, her binder a tool of control rather than fairness. Outside, the neighborhood pulsed with activity. At the gas station, conversations buzzed. "Can you believe it? Attorney General right there in the cabin." Judith must have turned white as a sheet. In the diner, plates clattered as locals debated. "She's always picked favorites. The Johnsons get away with everything, oversized dock, lights everywhere, but Trevor adds a foot, and she's calling the cops." The Facebook group exploded with posts. "Support Judith. She keeps our values high." Countered by "It's time for change. Selective rules aren't rules at all." Trevor checked his phone, the screen lighting his face. "Look at this. She's got her allies posting already. saying I'm the outsider causing trouble. Roland peered over. Let them. It shows their desperation. We counter with facts, these stories. The USB drive played again, Judith's voice filling the cabin. We need to make examples of people like Gaines. Can't let them think they can ignore us. Trevor's fists clenched. She's been planning this. More visitors came, Marcus and Tessa with additional files, a retired couple with emails showing Judith's harsh tone. The cabin filled with voices, the table overflowing with evidence. Roland took meticulous notes, his lawyer's eye spotting connections. See here, dates match. Fines issued to certain residents while others similar violations ignored. This is favoritism, plain and simple. As the afternoon wore on, the gathering moved to Frank's back porch nearby, the group expanding. Grilled chicken sizzled, but the talk was serious. I've got recordings too. Someone said, board meetings where she laughs about putting people in their place. Evelyn shared more. My husband loved that swing. We'd sit there watching sunsets. Judith said it clashed. Clashed with what? Her idea of perfection. Callie added, my kids cried when I took down the hoop. Mom, why can't we play? Because Judith decided it violated harmony. What harmony? The one where her friends do what they want. Trevor felt the collective anger, but also hope. We're not alone, that's her weakness, she thought we were. Roland addressed the group. This evidence can force change, but we need to go public. A forum, press, show the world the pattern. Nods rippled. I'm in, Frank said. Been quiet too long. As the sun dipped lower, Judith felt the shift in her own home. Her phone buzzed with messages from allies, but fewer than before. She paced, binder open on her table. They think they can undermine me. This community would crumble without my standards. She called a hasty meeting with loyalists in her living room, the air tense. Trevor's stirring chaos. The Attorney General is an outsider meddling. We must push back. Emails, posts, remind everyone order comes from us. But even her supporters wavered. Judith, the stories, people are talking, maybe compromise. She snapped, compromise, that's weakness, we fight. Her manifesto email went out, vigilant against threats to our integrity. But responses were mixed, some supportive, many forwarded to Trevor with notes, she's losing it. Back at the cabin, Trevor read it. Doubling down, Roland smiled faintly. Good, it exposes her. The tipping point neared. Some clung to Judith's order. Others saw the cost. Fines, threats, silence. Trevor carried the weight, but it fueled him. The fight grew, leading to the evening's climax. Roland arranged a quick forum at the library, the room packing with 50 plus. Stories flowed, porch swings, hoops, fines. Trevor spoke. Peace doesn't mean silence in unfairness. Applause echoed. News spread fast. Judith's meeting faltered, allies uneasy. The day hurtled on, ripples becoming waves. As shadows lengthened over Lake Keowee, the community's tension peaked at the HOA meeting in the brick community center. Fluorescent lights hummed, chairs filled with residents, the air thick with anticipation. Trevor and Roland entered, faces turning, some encouraging, others wary. Judith sat at the head, binder ready, gavel in hand. She rapped sharply, order, recent events demand address. My actions protect our values. Applause sparse. Trevor rose. Your actions intimidate. Selective enforcement ignored forms, targeted families, not leadership, control. Judith narrowed eyes. You don't understand the work. Evelyn stood. I do 20 years here. You forced my husband's swing down, power, not rules. Frank added, fines for nonsense, ignoring others, unfair. Judith gavelled. Out of order, Roland rose, silencing. Order needs fairness, not fear. Judith reddened. No jurisdiction here. The law applies. Harassment under rules, my business. Board shifted. Sandra, step aside. Judith, I've held us together. Trevor, trust broken crumbles standards. Eruption. Applause mutters. Roland, protect or punish. Decide now. Sandra, vote of no confidence. Chaos. Judith furious, but tide turned. Vote unofficial, but verdict clear. Power broken. Hours later, changes. Open talks. Fear lifted. Roland inquired, ordered called. Judith resigned at cabin, stepping down. Tail lights faded. New president elected. Bylaws rewritten. Callie boarded. Kids played. Evelyn swung. Trevor fished. Family laughed. Peace earned. Cookout. Laughter. Change victory. Story cautioned. Fairness from refusal to silence.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.